Hello, friends and enemies, heroes and villains, welcome to Epic Realms. Today's guest is an independent author who is known for his horror, sci fi, and psycho fiction. Joe Prosit, welcome to Epic Realms. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Nick. Thanks for having me on. Excited to be here.
Me and you first met not too long ago, just around the corner at Twin Cities Con. We did a handful of panels together. And before we kind of like get into your story and where you came from and all of that, I kind of want to get your take on what you think of Twin Cities Con. If it was your first Twin Cities Con, how many times you've been there? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so this is my second year at Cities Con, and I absolutely love it. It's one of my top conventions the whole year through, and honestly, the best part about it, and the reason I have honestly the most fun there, is because all my author friends show up. It's like Twin Cities Con and Des Moines Con, the Seventh Street conventions. Really, Jerry Shepard does a lot of or does all of the writers track program, and really brings everybody in. So it's a little bit like a family reunion. Because I do, so many conventions that, you might show up at this place and one person that you know is there, or two people, and then you might show up to the next place and another different two people that you know. But at Twin Cities and Des Moines, that's when it seems like everybody comes together. And yeah, it's a great time and a great convention as well on its own in its own regard.
Awesome. Uh, Going backtracking, your life, your youth, growing up, what kind of books did you listen to or read? I guess.
Um,
If you're my
yeah,
age,
I
then it was
mean,
probably be read. They didn't really have audiobooks back then, I guess. So
right.
they
I
did, but they
was
weren't
I was
very
big
good.
into I mean they had some cassette tapes. I don't think I listened to like a book on tape
Right.
until I was like in my 20s. But yeah, I mean it started off with like comic books, like
Okay.
Spider-Man, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a lot of G.I. Joe. And I just if there's comic book nerds out there, the Larry Hama Marvel G.I. Joe series, I've been slowly chiseling away. Like I had bought them all through my childhood and started doing a lot more comic book conventions. And of course, there's comic book dealers there.
Yeah.
And one by one, I'm like, oh, this issue I'm missing, it's like $10. I'll take that. And then, oh, this one's $20. And then, of course, as I got down to the last remaining few, the price tag started going up. And I'm like, oh, now it's this one's $40, this one's $60. And I just bought my last missing issue out of the whole run. So now I have the full run from issue one to issue 155. And I don't want to admit how much I paid for the last issue.
What number? Which
It
issue number
was
was the last one? Was it number one or was it a different one?
no, it was 155. It was the last one of the
Okay.
whole run because by then, like the popularity of the series had kind of tanked out, and they did some really low print runs, especially that last issue. So it's kind of like a holy grail, and yeah, couldn't find it anywhere in person. And it kind of heard from all the dealers, like, yeah, that's the hard one to get. And,
Oh.
you know, leave it to eBay. They got it. But yeah, it was. I'll just say it was three digits. I didn't pay four, but
Are you gonna send them in to get graded? Get the big hard case and the little grading on it and all that?
yeah, I might like I got like issue one is of course like a big one, and then issue 21 is Silent Interlude is the one. It's got Snake Eyes on the cover. And the really unique thing about the whole book is that there's no dialogue throughout the whole thing.
Because he
And
doesn't
it's
talk.
like right.
I know my GI
Like
Joe. Come
even
on now.
there's other. Oh yeah, all right. But yeah, so it's like probably like the most popular book of the whole run. So maybe one of those, maybe 155, the last one, maybe the first one, maybe 21. Um, I'm not too worried about like selling them or what they're worth because like I want to hang on to the whole
They're for
run.
you.
I'll let
Yeah.
yeah. After I'm dead and in my grave, my kids can do all that and
Right.
they can get, who knows, a couple $100 out of the deal.
Did you have any troubles with writing in school, or were you good in school and elementary school, high school when it came to the writing, or were you kind of like me where it's like, no, I'll go do other stuff?
So I was a terrible student, like absolutely awful, like ADHD kid. I was getting up in the middle of the class and walking across the room and hanging out with my friends and just was not paying attention in a given time. But I'd always loved writing. So like come math class, when I was supposed to be learning long division, I was writing G.I. Joe comic books or Ninja Turtle comic books or my own, like me and my friend with I drew like comic strips, and then we would, sell them for like 25 cents a piece at the playground.
Right.
Um, but yeah, yeah. So terrible student, and like the stories and reading and all that kind of came naturally. But I really learned like grammar and everything way later than I should have. Um, so yeah, it's kind of an odd approach, but um, it seems to be working.
Yeah. Yeah. Worked out for you. Did
Yeah.
did you go to do college, or did you go straight into the military out of high
I
school?
as soon as I turned 18, I ran for the hills, joined the army, and it felt like freedom. If you can imagine basic training feeling like freedom, it that's what it felt like. Because I was away from home and I was away from pretty much everybody I'd ever known, and it was a great opportunity to sort of like redefine myself and figure out who I was and what I liked and what I didn't like. And so yeah, and then was stationed out in California for a few years and met some, some friends that I'll love till I die. And then came back and I did 2 years at St. Cloud State, got my AA degree, and kind of never went back. It was just, the because I started working full time for the Army in the Minnesota Guard, and then, wife and kids and house and
Yeah.
other jobs, and I just never came back to that to the classroom. Not that I didn't enjoy it as an adult. Like
Right.
once I'd kind of joined the
Matured.
army and learned how to settle down a little bit,
Yeah.
learn how to sit my butt in a chair for more than 5 minutes at a time. I enjoyed the classroom, but yeah, I just never had like a financial or career need to go back to college. So yeah, and now I'm doing this and I'm as busy as ever.
When did you start to get into writing and then decide eventually, hey, I'm gonna try and get something published or produced or anything like that?
Yeah, it was always something I wanted to do. Like as soon as I turned 18, I wanted to get some stuff written and published and this and that. And this is back in the day of like, the self-addressed stamped envelope, sending things in paper.
Yeah.
Back in my day when Pepperidge Farm remembers, there was no online submission. It was just, you take your manuscript and you put it in a 8.5 by 11 manila envelope with a self-addressed envelope in it so they can mail you back their rejection letter. And I did that a little bit, but again, like life was really busy and chaotic and young kids and everything. And so I only did that for a little while, didn't really have any like hits where anything got picked up.
No, that was before or
um,
after the military?
I mean, like I just retired 3 years ago, so it was after California, but
Okay.
like while I was in here in Minnesota.
Okay.
Um, so, um, but yeah, I mean, we're talking, 20 some years ago.
Right.
And then always did it. I've never stopped writing. I've never not written. There's been periods where, I haven't written as much. And like, obviously right now I'm writing more than ever. Um, but well, it was 2014. Um, I kind of saw my Army retirement coming up, right? And talking with the wife and looking at finance numbers and things like that, and we decided, I think we can do this full time. I think I can do this full time. So let's start kind of building a path to get there. Like what should I be doing now so that 5 years from now, when it's time to retire, I'm kind of launching off the launch pad, right?
Right.
Um, so I started writing short stories and doing a lot of workshops and a lot of hitting that submission cycle, this time with, an email rather than the envelopes. But got my first short story published in 2014
Okay.
in Sanitarium magazine. And
That's a great magazine
ever
to be in.
since, it is, yeah, yeah. And got my name on the cover. I was super proud.
Yeah.
It was like a great boost really early on in my career. And
I'm assuming that was a
yeah,
horror
and
story.
yep,
Okay.
yep. Called the Flea Circus, and it's still out there. If you pick up Machines, Monsters, Maniacs Volume One, it's I think it's like the second story from the end of the book.
Okay.
So yeah, and that's kind of like what I started doing is just after I'd get stories published wherever I could, and once I had enough to bundle them up and put them into a collection, I did that, and yeah, that Volume One of my short stories was the first book that I kicked out. that was only like 2.5 years ago. It was, well, maybe 3.5 years ago, because it was right as I was getting ready to transition out of the military.
Okay. Did you know right away, like beforehand, hey, I want to do horror? Because there's a lot of genres people can do. And if you
Yeah.
were a comic book fan and a GI Joe fan, like that's not necessarily a horror influence, right? So did you have thoughts
Yeah,
of
yeah.
doing other stuff, or was it just like, no, I want to do horror?
I think when I was a kid, it was like, superheroes were very approachable and the comics were really approachable. And I think I kind of, as I grew up, it would turn more into, um, when I was like a teenager, I was all gun ho military stuff. So I wanted to write like, like military action type stuff.
Yeah,
And, like my influences were like all the Arnold Schwarzenegger movies, because we're talking like early 90s, right?
yeah, yeah.
Um, but then also like, sneaking down after my parents went to bed to watch like Tales from the Crypt
Okay, yeah,
and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. So like these horror influences started sneaking in. Um, but yeah, I think I imagined myself probably more as a sci-fi writer when I was getting started. And maybe it's just the format of short stories. I think it lends itself really well to horror. Like when you think about like Twilight Zone or Tales from the Crypt or Creep Show, and even like the sci-fi ones like Black Mirror, there's a horror element to it. There's
right,
so much. It's like that tragic twist, ironic ending that works so well with shorts. So yeah, I mean, I'm not dedicated to horror. Like
right.
when I want to write sci-fi, I'll write sci-fi. If I want to write, I got a couple fantasy projects in the along the assembly line. So those will be coming out maybe soon, maybe a long time from now. I don't know.
Yeah, it just depends on what you
But
depends on
what's
what you
that?
get. Depends on what you got going on.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think one project should come out like in the next few months.
Okay,
And then I have a fantasy series that I've been working on for a long time. And I knew since the beginning, I'm like, this thing's going to be 6 books, right? Because like six is a thematic number in this. Um, and between all my other novels, I would kind of take a break and write a book of the fantasy series. So none of it's seen the light of day yet. And I'm
okay,
currently on the first draft of book 5.
okay,
And I think I might kick out book 1 here within like a year.
okay.
And then it'll kind of be rapid fire, kick out all 6 of those shortly after, and not pull a George R. R. Martin and leave the last book out there hanging for an eternity.
When you got in between having that first short story published and publishing your first book, what did that journey between that first short story and the first published book, what did that journey look like for you?
A lot of short stories, honestly. And like because I knew when I was going to retire and because I knew when I was going to start transitioning to be writing full time, I did write. So Bad Brains was the first novel that came out. And I wrote that while I was still in. And then I wrote a 3-part sci-fi series, and called the first book called 99 Town. So I kind of was like lining them up in the chute so that once that retirement date hit, then I could, it was almost like 6 months. Every 6 months, I was kicking out a new book. Um, but yeah, I mean, like I'd written, there's novels that will never see the light of day, that I kind of wrote, and like novellas and shorter things that, you know, as you learn and as you grow, and then you look back on earlier stuff you did, there's stuff that I'm like, yeah, that's going to stay in the drawer.
Yeah,
Maybe someday down the road I could pick it up and redo the whole thing if I really wanted to. But I always have new ideas too. So
right.
like I don't have time for the old stuff because I got new stuff that I want to kick out.
What was the process to getting that first book published? Because independent authors, everybody's got a little bit of a different journey and how they got to that point. And some people, they get to that point and they put it out there and nothing happens and they get discouraged.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
some people, they'll get it out there and they put it out there and it does great. And then next thing you know, they're a franchise and all the publishing companies are clamoring over them. What was your process to getting that first full novel published?
Yeah. So a huge help to me right off the bat is there's a local writers group called Lakes Area Writers Alliance that's out of Brainerd.
Okay.
And before I went, and it's just we meet at the local library, maybe 10, 15 people that show up on a Tuesday night. But before I started doing that, like I didn't know I was in the headspace of like I'm gonna get this traditionally published, right?
Right.
Um, so I was going that route and getting all the rejection letters and getting the small bites like, oh, well, send me a partial manuscript and this agent will review it. And then they review it and then you don't hear anything back. And they're like, oh, send me a full manuscript. Like, okay, well, this is a little better now. Maybe I'm getting somewhere. But it was just, it's a tough road to go on and you really don't have any control about when something's going to get picked up, when it's going to get published. So I started doing, I was listening to the people, the other independent authors who were in this local writers group of mine. And I started doing a lot of my own research. And what I kind of realized fairly early on that there was a moment where it like flipped the switch for me. And it's when I realized like, if you can't be successful as an indie publisher, you won't be successful as a traditionally published author either. Like there's this idea, right, of this like rags to riches, I just need to be discovered kind of American Idol idea of like, I just got to get my book in front of the right person, right?
Right.
And what I kind of gained to realize and took to heart was like maybe an agent will love it and they'll sell it to one of the big five publishers. And then in our minds, I'm like, okay, well, now I'm a millionaire and I'm getting, six-figure advances and I'm, touring the country and the publisher's picking up the bill for everything. The reality is the big publishers still leave it on the author to do the vast majority of promotion and selling and getting it in bookstores and all those things. And it just kind of dawned on me. I'm like, well, if I have to do everything anyways, what am I waiting for?
Right.
Right? Like, let's take the horse by the reins and let's do this. So,
And keep
yeah,
the
jumped
extra
in, pulled
profit.
the trigger. Right, right. And that's something that I realized much later is like if if I'm indie, that means I don't have to pay a bunch of CEOs and investors a chunk of my. I mean, I'm still am right because my print shops are big corporations
Right.
that get their cut, but um, much more of that profit, especially when I sell in person at things like conventions.
Right.
So much more of that is going into my kitty versus theirs.
Yeah, for sure. You mentioned about looking back at some of the other stuff that's in the drawers and being like, God, that stuff is so old and whatnot. How have you looked at your stuff? What has changed from your first couple stories to now in the way you write?
Yeah, I I think I feel like when we start to, as creators of any genre, when we start in on whether it's a genre or a medium or whatever, um, at least for me, anyways, it's kind of like I had to like lay the groundwork. Like when I started writing science fiction, I went to like almost like old school Robert Heinlein, retro rockets sci-fi, and I almost had to do a lot of like the catching up to where sci-fi is at right now early on. And that's just in like genre tropes and norms and things like that to kind of like to the point where I'm at now where like not only am I aware of all these great sci-fi classics and where the genre is at today, but I've also had practice writing those early things. So now I kind of got the need to have like a spaceship traveling bounty hunter who's like, kind of. I had this series that was like a what if Conan the Barbarian was a sci-fi.
Okay.
Um,
That sounds fun.
and yeah, and I still love the idea, and maybe that is one that I'll go back to. But for me, like just that on its surface is kind of boring. Like I want to say more. I want to do more than just like kind of that action adventure and getting a little more nuanced and using a bit more satire and subtext and those things. It just takes time, and I feel like I had to have that foundation of kind of writing pretty straightforward to build up to where I am now, where like I'll give you the fun action adventure sci-fi, but I'm also going to make you think while I'm doing it.
That's great. That's a great key. I learned that a lot from stand-up comedians. They do that too. Like you can be funny, but if you can make them think, I think that was George Carlin that said that. It's like, that's great. It's
Oh yeah.
amazing. I mentioned at the beginning when I did the introduction that sci-fi, you do work on sci-fi. We were just talking about that. But you do horror and psycho fiction. Now, tell our audience how those two things are different. What is the difference between a horror and psycho fiction? Because a lot of people
Yeah,
would assume
yeah.
it's the same thing, right? They're like, oh, they're both horror.
Yeah, I mean, like really, like that psycho fiction is kind of obvious. It's like a made up genre, right? It's not a real. You won't find it on the shelf of Barnes and Noble, but like it's kind of a catch all for everything that fits between crime noir, ghost stories, horror, maybe some sci-fi in there. Um, really like a good leaning into like psychological thrillers where you have those unreliable narrators and yeah, it was kind of a catch-all because as I was writing all these short stories, like I never thought about genre, right?
Okay.
It was just I got this cool idea and I want to do it. So when I had it all said and done, I was ready to kick out that collection. I'm looking at this kind of ungainly, awkward mess, and I'm like, how do I kind of package this all wrap it in one bow? So that was my made up genre that kind of fit everything else in along with it. And like I think I can roll with that kind of catchphrase or whatever you want to call it throughout my career because it's like I know I'm going to add some fantasy to my catalog here soon. Um, but even that, like it's so like the big fantasy series, I can pitch it in 5 words. Um, you got like your Wheel of Time or Lord of the Rings, so you got your epic fantasy, but instead of medieval Europe, I threw it in the context of like Napoleonic or World War I era, so that
Okay.
we can have dragons and machine guns.
Nice.
So like that has horror elements to it.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, it's even that alone, we can call it fantasy, but it's going to be a blend of multiple genres and hopefully something new that people, aren't used to and comes at them fresh.
Yeah. When we were talking together at some of the panels we did, I brought up to the panel asking about the difference between the themes and genres and things like pacing and how you put together the story and the structure of a story and the difference between the genres for you, sci-fi, fantasy, horror. What are some of the differences when it comes to building and pacing your stories, or is it just I just throw it together, I don't worry about that stuff? What is it for you?
Um, I mean, I write to my own style. Um, like obviously I mentioned Wheel of Time and very, very patient pacing, right? Especially in the notorious slog in the middle. You spend a whole novel that's 1,000 pages long, and the events that happen aren't that many events, but it's like a lot of world building and a lot of like fleshing out and so many characters, so you have a lot of nuance in that. I prefer a pretty fast pace storytelling style where each chapter is going to be, it might not be like a big action scene, but it is something that has its own beginning, middle, and end that's coming pretty quick, and each scene leads to the next one and the next one, where you get that snowball effect of all these small events and all these um, quick hits that are building to this much larger, bigger um, conflict or event.
So it
So
doesn't
yeah, I
matter
mean, like,
the genre.
yeah, it doesn't really matter too much to me, um, whether it's fantasy or horror. There's times where I feel like the story needs to breathe and we need time to spend with characters, and I think like a good dialogue scene really isn't that different than a good fight scene, right? Because it's two different people that have opposing views, and even if it's they're arguing about what to have for lunch, instead of like I don't know two nuclear submarines dueling it out for the end of the world or whatever, um, there's a back and forth. There's a kind of punch and block, and yeah, and like I love a good dialogue scene. I love a good two characters who are uh, kind of dancing around each other and looking for that opening and testing this and and getting blocked here and going this different route. Um, I think that makes for good characters, and I think it makes for a fun read.
I loved some of your answers, such as what you were just talking about. There's questions that I asked during the presentations, during the panels that we did, and a lot of times the authors, one will say something, and then somebody will agree, and then somebody will agree, and then you're like, I don't agree, and here's why. And everyone's sitting there, you're talking and you're saying your thing, and by the end of it, all the other authors are nodding their head, and I'm like, that's just super cool. I've got to try and remember some of these questions and ask them when I bring them on the show. So with that being said, that was one of those questions. My next question is, tell us your theory on the difference between outlining and pantsing, and which are you?
Yeah, yeah. So I do plot out my novels in advance, and a lot of people will say like the story takes them wherever the characters go, and maybe I am a bit more of a tyrant as to what my characters do. But what I've found is that if I can do that discovery writing, right? Of like and that's the really the fun part, where like you're learning where the story's going as you create it. I do that in the outline format, and it's still fun to me, and it's still exciting, it's still fresh, and it still has its surprises. But then when I go down to actually like hammer out the words and get it onto, something of a draft that'll look like the finished product, now that I already know the big movements, and how I can focus more on those, nuances of character and the prose itself, and dial into that, um, kind of like turn it from a telescope into a microscope.
Right, for sure. Do you read now? Do you read other people's stuff?
Oh yeah, yeah. I'm always reading.
What
I
kind of
mean, if
what kind of stuff do you enjoy when you see it? Do you like, I got to go to that, I got to go to this?
Yeah, I mean, so like right now I'm rereading Stephen King's Dark Tower series.
Okay.
Um, so I'll read traditionally published authors. I'm always on the hunt for like whoever whoever people are talking about. I have to leave like Sarah J. Maas. Like I'm not into romantasy, but her name is on everybody's mouths. I'm like, well, I need to read some Sarah J. Maas. So I read Court of Rose and Thorns, Thorns and
Okay.
Roses, whatever that one was. Um, I read a lot of short stories. I also read my fellow indie authors. Um, yeah, and then also still, going back to comic books and things like that. So I try to read widely,
Okay.
and but yeah, and so like I usually at any given time I'm reading three books. There's usually a nonfiction book, there's a fiction book, and then I have a fiction book that I just throw in my bag. It's like my travel book.
Okay.
So the three books I'm reading right now is Wolves of the Kala. That's book 5 of the Dark Tower series. My travel book is A Farewell to Arms, so Hemingway. And then my nonfiction, which I'm listening to audio, is The Guns of August, which is a World War One. And this is my second read through of that book too, because it is phenomenal.
Okay.
Um, and it's about the first month of World War One, and it's a little bit of research too, because I'm writing this fantasy series that's kind of set up in that setting. But I'm always blown away by um, coming from a military background, about that conflict between, or that collision between tactics and technology,
Yeah.
and how the tactics were so far behind the technology, and just like the onslaught and the waste of life that occurred. And just like, I mean, talk about horror, right?
Right.
Like the first month, really all of World War One, but particularly that first month,
Right.
that's a horror novel, man. That's straight up.
What kind of research do you do for your books? You're doing sci-fi. A lot of horror is, modern, or there's technology or history that's involved. What is your take on doing research, and what is your process for doing that? Is it kind of light, or is it like you got to get the nitty-gritty details to make sure everything's as accurate as possible?
It's pretty light. It's pretty light. I
Okay.
think I'm doing more research for this fantasy series that I've been talking about,
Okay.
than anything else. But like my best-selling book is Look What You Made Me Do, and it's like my love letter to 70s, 80s, 90s slasher horror movies. And the research that I had to do to that, I mean, I've been doing it my whole life, right?
Right.
Like, you know, I know all the Friday the 13th movies, all the Nightmare on Elm Streets, the Evil Deads, and you know, a lot of the more obscure ones. So it's always fun to like go and dig in and find the things that are missing. And that's one of the things I love about conventions, especially the horror conventions. Like you're gonna find the obscure movies because
Right.
you're talking to people all the time. And I mean, somebody brought up like Attack of the Killer Donuts, which was like stupid, cheesy, like terrible CGI, but you know, just something to laugh at for an hour and a half. And then a good friend of mine, my cover artist, Jamie Coker, they were talking about the Greasy Strangler, and it's I guess exactly what it sounds. It's this guy who's covered in grease who goes around strangling people. But if you can imagine like Napoleon Dynamite meets, I don't know, like a serial killer movie. It really super awkward and weird and like, yeah, yeah. I can't recommend it enough. It's a super strange but really fun movie to watch. So, yeah, I mean, when it comes to a lot of like the pop culture research, if you even call it that, it's just, you know, immersing yourselves in the things that I like, whether it's reading or movies or like I'm influenced by music, by, you know, classical art, by architecture. Um, you know, the thing I've said probably too often is like my brain is a blender, right? And I just take off the top of the skull and I dump everything in it. Whatever I enjoy, whatever I like. And a lot of times, like the things that are done really poorly, that helps as well. Like that's like you see where people went wrong or how it could have been better. But all that stuff just kind of dumps into my head. And then whatever comes out, like out of that blender, like that's my smoothie, right?
Right.
Like I have incorporated all those things, and good luck kind of, you know, picking the berries from the bananas from the milk or whatever you make your smoothie out of. Um, but yeah, so I mean, I'm not cracking open encyclopedias and poring over them for like super historically accurate, um, you know, information, which is great. Like writing a fantasy series in World War One, when I get the facts wrong, I'm like, well, this didn't happen on Earth, right? Like
Right.
this is a different world.
You mentioned Jamie Coker, and a shout out to him. He's always at every convention I ever go to. How did you meet up with him for your cover artist?
Conventions.
Yeah, just ran across him like,
I,
hey, do you want to do a cover for my book?
yeah, you know, I know I ran into him a bunch of times. Like him and his wife are great.
Yeah,
And I don't remember like where that like, you know, just kind of friendship merged into like, um, you know, cover deal.
yeah,
But I think I wanted to kind of pizzazz up my the Machines, Monsters, Maniacs, the short story collections. I had this idea in my head of like doing um, like the EC comic, you know, Tales from the Crypt or like the weird.
yeah.
I wanted to do something like that um, for the short story collection. And Jamie's art is fantastic.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
it's so fun and so cool, and it has that comic book style to it. So I asked him, and he killed it. He's done two covers for Volume One and Volume Two. He just cranked out a new cover for Look What You Made Me Do because I wanted to kind of bring that one to life and you know showcase this local artist as well. And then I think we'll have another one out in, you know, a couple months. So yeah, I love his work, and I've been going to more and more local artists. So I was just using Fiverr, you know, getting
Yeah.
started. I had like investing no money into it and kind of being financially timid. So I was getting cheap covers, and I kind of I think I got what I paid for.
Right.
And now that I'm doing this more full time, like I'm able to really find some really cool artists and make some killer covers.
How important are covers in sales, especially when you're going to conventions?
Oh yeah, yeah, it's crazy. And like I can tell which covers are good because people will, you know, I'll tell them, I think, like, you're gonna love this book over here. This is a great book. Here's the characters, here's the blah, 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 blah. And then they'll say, well, what about this one? And it's
Yeah.
the cover that leaps out to them. So yeah, I mean, like, we can say all we want that you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but that's the first thing people see. And the thing about books that's different than say like visual art, like the stuff that like Jamie and a lot of other artists do, or the toys or the pillows or whatever, right? Like I can walk up to a booth that sells a bunch of stuffed animals and I can say, I want that one right there just by looking, right?
Right.
Because I can see it and it kind of like I can take it all in just with my eyes. But a book, like nobody can sit in front of your booth and read the whole thing and decide whether or not they like it before they're going to buy it.
Right.
So um, it's a lot of conversations, it's a lot of talking and pitching, which I enjoy. It's if anybody out there is looking to be an independent author, congratulations! You're now an author and a salesperson and a promoter and an event organizer and an accountant and a part-time narcissist. So
Yeah.
ready to wear a lot of hats.
Manual labor because you're setting up tables
Yeah.
at things. How important are conventions? We've had a lot of people on that go to conventions and do convention tours. Some authors don't do it and they're like, I don't think of the things, and then later they're like, I wish I would have. For you,
Yeah.
how when you discovered conventions, how important did you realize they really were?
Yeah, so 90% of my sales happen in person. So if that's a measure, I mean, that's 90% of my business right there. It's really hard to distinguish yourself online because you are one of, millions. And when you're not there to pitch that book, it is strictly the blurb on the back and the cover, right? Um, and that's really hard to kind of, especially if it's kind of, doesn't fit into that tight genre.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is, well, I know there's a model to sell a lot of books online, right? And um, the trick is first write in like a really, really well-read genre. So like cozy murder mysteries, fantasy is a big one, romance, smut is selling really big.
Yeah,
Um,
you can say
so write a lot of
it.
that. You'd be surprised how many people come up to my booth and then you get it. And I'll ask them, what kind of books do you like to read? Like smut. And they're, kind of some are like a little sheepish about it,
Yeah,
and others are really proud.
yeah,
So
yeah.
I get a kick out of that. But yeah, write in one of those genres, write series, keep the same characters rolling over and over and over again, and kick out a ton of books, and then advertise a ton, dump a ton of money into online ads, and that is a proven model for selling indie books. I don't write those genres. I don't write that quick. I think I write pretty quick, but I'm definitely not kicking out a novel every 3 months.
Right.
Um, and the online advertising so far, it's just kind of seemed like a money pit to me. So I love doing the conventions. I love meeting people in person. I love telling people about my book. Um, it was just a local one, but I had this really awesome interaction where I sold this lady a book and she wandered off and came back about 45 minutes later and said, I read the first paragraph, I want more. And I'm like, all right, that's the kind of feedback I want. Like
Yeah.
that tells me that I'm doing my job right. So yeah, there's so many good experiences doing all these conventions and meeting so many cool artists and people, and it leads to other things. Um, so yeah, I swear by them.
What conventions are you going to be doing? If people want to come find you and find some of your books and hear you tell them about the books, where are some of the conventions this year that they can catch you at?
Yeah, so I do tattoo conventions as well as the kind of more pop culture ones. So this coming weekend, I'll be in St. Louis at the St. Louis Tattoo Convention. Following that, I do a bunch of quad cons, and they're set up somewhere in the Midwest almost every weekend. So I'll be in Rockford, Illinois, at in 2 weeks from now, and then Days of the Dead in Chicago. I try to hit up Chicago quite a bit, especially the horror conventions. But yeah, the Fan Expos, Twin Cities Con, trying to get into C2E2. We'll see what happens there. And then also Crypticon in Minneapolis is another horror convention.
Okay. So there we go. People can go and check that out there. Of course, joeprosit.com. We'll re-mention joeprosit.com here later on down the road when we start winding down at the end. But people can go and check out that, and you keep a pretty good update on your website with all of the conventions and events that you like to go to. So
Yeah, sometimes the website gets behind, but always the social media I'm always kicking out, and usually with more detail of when, where, what the hours are, what hotel or strip mall or convention center will be set up in.
yeah, tell us about your latest book, Reality Reaction Team.
Yeah, yeah. So really excited about this one.
Because that
Came
came out
out
in
about
January,
two
right?
months ago. Yep, came out January 9th. So pretty hot off the press. And yeah, it's the story of team of secret agents whose job it is to, when you give them a call, they'll show up and they'll let you know whether or not what you're experiencing is reality or not. And this is necessary because, we're in the future and there's, in addition to all our kind of our modern day confusions of like propaganda and fake news and AI and deep fakes, there's also simulated realities inside of simulated realities, like this maze of like matrices. So at any given time, nobody's quite sure whether or not what they're experiencing is actually real or not.
Okay.
And then the big twist is our main character, the newest member of the reality reaction team, chronically suffers from hallucinations. So yeah, I always like to think, who's the wrong man for the job, right?
Nice. And what genre would you say this fits into?
Yeah, this is like your sci-fi. You're kind of I like to say it's like a kind of that Philip K. Dick, much more than like an Isaac Asimov,
Okay.
kind of that trippy, far out there. Yeah. So if you think of movies like Everything Everywhere All at Once mixed with The Fifth Element, mixed with Ghostbusters or Men in Black,
Okay.
it's kind of what you got going on here.
Okay. That's
I
awesome.
dig the kind of that 1940s crime noir of like, jazz and fedoras and men in black suits mixed with like kind of the aesthetic of like Fifth Element with like flying cars and these huge mega cities and all these little portals that bring you to all these different simulated realities. So yeah, it's a roller coaster. It's a fun ride.
Nice. You got another book coming out here March 8th or about there. They Come From Below. You want to tell us about that one? What
Um,
genre that is?
that's out right now.
That's out right now.
Yep, yep.
Damn you,
I must
Amazon,
have some other
lying to me, telling me to pre-order for March 8th.
Oh, that's weird. I wonder what's going on there.
Yeah.
That is going to be Jamie's doing a new cover for that one. So,
Okay.
I might have pulled that one back and we'll be relaunching it with a brand new cover. Um, but yeah, kind of Lovecraftian horror set in up north, small town Minnesota. Um, and yeah, I can pitch that one really quick too because
Do
this
it.
was
Let's
this
go.
one a fun one.
I love Lovecraftian
Um,
anything, really.
right, yeah. Well, we'll talk some more Lovecraft here in a little bit, but
Okay.
yeah, so there's this woman who lives all by herself in her nice quiet house in her nice quiet town. She's like a accountant for the county courthouse, boring, mundane life. She likes to read books, um, and fairly happy. But she has this one small problem, and that is that anytime she feels like her sense of morality is slipping, or she feels like she's committing some sin, a literal, physical, monstrous demon from hell climbs up her basement stairs, and she's got to kill it with an axe.
Whoa. Okay.
So it's a little problem.
It has to be an
Minor,
axe,
minor.
or that's just the
Not necessarily, but that's what she's got at hand.
okay.
That's her weapon of choice.
Nice. So people can go and check out both of those. They can pick them up on your website. You got links to all that stuff there. I know in our live stream we've got links to those as well, to your website and to those books. But another thing that's brand new that you and I kind of talked about beforehand, and you didn't know, I already knew. I was already planning on bringing it up. The Black Heart Unbroken. I kind of want to
Yes,
hit a
yeah.
sound alert that
So,
goes dun dun dun.
so speaking of conventions, and one reason why conventions I love them and believe in them wholeheartedly is I attended Crypticon for 2 years in a row now, and while I was there, I met this director actor named Jennifer Prettyman, and we kind of exchanged pleasantries and business cards, and went on our way. Like networking at conventions is a great thing to always do, right?
Right.
And she seemed like a talented person from Minneapolis here in the area. And after that second time we'd met, like a month goes by, and I get a Facebook message. She says, "Hey, I want to kick out a movie for the film festival season, and I got writer's block. And you got anything?" And me, Mr. Short Story, I'm like, absolutely, I got something. So there's some back and forth. I kind of threw a lot of ideas and a lot. She's like, I'm not sure that's exactly what I'm looking for. Um, but between that collaboration, she's like, I have myself and another lead actress. We have the warden's house in Stillwater, and I want to make like a I'm like, okay, 2 female leads, haunted house, got it. I'm gonna crank out a couple more drafts, and eventually she's like, "This is awesome, I love it, let's do it." And like, I always kind of guard my expectations. So full transparency, I said, "Okay, great, believe it when I see it," right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
um, and but sure enough, as time goes by, she's like, "Hey, we got a cast, and we got a crew, and we got a location." I'm like, "No kidding." And we're going to be filming in February 13th and 14th and 15th. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is happening."
Right, it's
Right?
happening.
Yeah, yeah. And went to a production meeting and met some of the cast and crew there, and we did a table read. And yeah, this past weekend, Fridays, all day Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, busted our rumps, and we filmed this thing. Yeah, and it's in the can as of last night. As of late last night, we had a wrap, and this thing should be coming out sometime. Well, it'll premiere at the North Star Film Festival in April. I think
Okay,
it's April 18th.
okay.
So really cool experience.
Now, I don't
Like
want you to
it's
do any DMCA's or any of that kind of stuff, but I do want to know if you can tell me, did you have to write it as like a short story and then convert it into like script format? Did you write it as script format? Did somebody else
uh,
translate it, or was it just like they just went off of a short story format when doing this?
no, I wrote it in script format, and I've been dabbling in that more and more, and it's fun. Um, it's really fun because it's a different storytelling style,
Right.
and as I'm writing the script, I'm trying to keep in mind, like, I'm not directing from the page. Like, there's a cinematographer who's going to make these decisions,
Yeah.
who's going to do it better than I will, right?
Yeah.
Because that's his job and he has experience doing that. Um, and so yeah, it was really, really cool. So yeah, Jennifer Prettyman is the lead and the director. Gwen Ruloff is the other co-star, and Sean King is the cinematographer, and along with well, not a big crew, but a very small crew of other actors and crew members. And yeah, it was very cool listening. I'm sitting in the other room as the actors and the director are putting the scene together, where it's getting filmed, and I'm watching in the monitor, and I'm looking at my script, and there's these mature, talented adults who are reading the silly thing that I just wrote and making it real. And it was so surreal. It's so surreal to really have this thing that started off as this notion in my head, and now there's all this equipment and all these people have gathered around, and there's this whole team of really talented individuals who are making this thing into a reality. And yeah, just an absolute thrill the whole weekend.
That's exciting. Super awesome. I'm super happy for you, and I can't wait for that to come out and to get to see that hit places where they get hit, whether it's on a television screen or at a film festival. I'm very excited for you. That's awesome. You have any other projects coming up? Anything we missed? Anything you're like, I got it, I forgot to mention this, and this is coming out, or I'm working on this one thing that I want to mention. You got anything like that that you want
Yeah.
to fill in there before we move on?
So yeah, speaking of collaborations, so me and TR Nickel, Tiff,
Yeah, yeah.
she's been in some panels, or you know her. We're working a kind of science fiction, fantasy crossover, um, probably like novella
Okay.
length piece, and that's starting to come along really well. And first draft will be done here in the very near future, and yeah, look for that spring, summer.
Okay.
I already got a cover out for that. So like, yeah, so there's all these things that are kind of lined up along the assembly line, and little by little, they're all reaching, kind of the end of the line and coming out for production. So yeah, the projects never end. It's just one cool thing after another, and I like making cool stuff. So as long as I get to keep doing that, I'm in hog heaven.
Nice. People can again find you at joeprosit.com. Of course, you're on social media. You're on Instagram at Joe Prosit, Facebook /Joe.Prosit, X/Twitter at Joe Prosit, TikTok Joe.Prosit. You're everywhere. People can find you. Your website
Oh
has
yeah.
all of the stuff, all of the links to all of the things. So Joe, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, thank you, man. It's a great conversation.
People that are in the live stream, please stick around for the Q&A at the end after we are done doing the show, and get your questions in the chat if you have questions. I know I saw a few there already. So get your questions in there for your exclusive content with Joe Prosit. But first, coming up, Hipsters and Dragons blogger and author of Extraordinary Locations and How to Design Them, which is a book to create things for game masters. Duncan Rhodes is going to be joining us live March 2nd, and that's going to hit podcast feeds March 3rd. So that is our next episode, and that's going to be really cool to hear about all of his history, all of his projects, and things like that in the D&D tabletop role-playing sphere. Also coming up, indie author Justin Rose, we kind of mentioned him a little bit earlier. Brady Sadler and comic book writer and artist Tim Seeley are all going to be joining us. So if you want to catch any of those episodes, make sure to follow, subscribe, rate, review, push all of those buttons. It helps us, and in turn, helps our guests. So, for Joe Prosit, I am Nick, and I want to thank you all for listening to Epic Realms.